My good friend, Gilbert Foster. Backstory with he and I, before I was here, I was in a small agricultural community called Princeton, Illinois, about 100 miles or so outside of Chicago. And had a good 4 years there. It was fun. And then you guys called me out here, and it was a difficult decision to go from Northern California to from Northern Illinois to Northern California, but somehow I was convinced that this is what God's will was for my life, and I did it. Very glad I did when they're under about 10 inches of snow this morning. But anyway, a few years, they had a long kind of a up and down process of trying to find next pastor. And anyway, they finally landed on this guy from Scotland who was getting done with his seminary stuff in Chicago. And it happened to be this guy named Gilbert Foster. And Gilbert came and just had a great ministry experience down there, did good stuff. And then lo and behold, the same region that called me to come out here called him and invited him to come out to California. And he was pastor for many years down at our sister church in Reedley, California, and did an amazing job down there. Just incredible work. Gilbert is a banker by trade, has a great strategic mind. He's the kind of guy that in the UK, if a company ran into financial trouble and a bank had their note, he would be the CFO for a temporary time to make sure they got their stuff together before they would get more money. So very, very sharp thinker. But he was so passionate about this thing that he started, which we know as When I Grow Up, which is the parent thing covering Faraha Community Center, that he resigned from that great pastorate just a few years ago because he wanted to devote himself fully to this stuff. And you will see very quickly that my good friend is indeed passionate about this subject. He's the guy that invited me to come 8 years ago almost to go see firsthand what was going on. I was sold as soon as I touched ground and came back, shared the story. You guys were sold on what was happening in Faraha, and we started the feeding program, and just amazing things have happened because of your generosity since. Are you fans of Faraha, by the way? Yes, you are. So please welcome my good friend, Gilbert Foster.
Well, good morning. It is a joy to be with you in Napa. And Pete goes away from Princeton and he gets Napa. And I go away from Princeton and I get Reedley. Are you allowed to swear in this church? I've often wondered why was that the case. You know, I don't really know what I did wrong, but I got the wrong place. And you know, Princeton, I didn't actually live in Princeton. I mean, Princeton is just, it's a two-bit town, like 8,000 people and a super Walmart. And it's right on the I-80, and you cross rail tracks to get into it and out of it. And I only went down there part-time. On a Sunday, I would go down on a Saturday and leave on a Sunday afternoon, and I tell you, the nicest feeling was pulling over those rail tracks, leaving town, okay? And I caused havoc. I was only there as an interim guy, and I couldn't have stayed there. How many years were you there for? 10? 4 years. I couldn't stay for 4. I stayed for like 14 months, and I was out of there, okay? They chased me out of there. And then I went to Reedley. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. And I've said this before, haven't I? That really, I became a Catholic in my theology. So if you know anything about the Catholic faith, one of the aspects of the Catholic faith that's different from the Protestant faith is that they believe in purgatory. So purgatory is like you're waiting, when you die, you're waiting to eventually then maybe get to the better place. And I'm now Catholic in my belief. I am in purgatory, okay? And I live in it, okay? Well, actually, no, I've been promoted. I've moved from Reedley to Fresno. What the, you know? Fresno. There's no easy way in or out of Fresno. In fact, you never get out, just so you know. Don't ever go to Fresno. But it's great. So then we quit being a pastor, or were we fired? We haven't made that one up yet. And we wanted to lead this organization called When I Grow Up, which is a great title because it's about the dreams and aspirations of kids who just want to grow up. Every kid wants to grow up, you know, and be something. And so we call our organization When I Grow Up. And it's all about kids and getting them empowered out of poverty, extreme poverty. So there's poverty in America. It's relative poverty. Like the poverty line for a family of 4 for the last year was set at $26,000 a year. And if you were below that there, you lived in poverty. And around that net, there's $500 million which are sitting around there to try to help you in various programs, government-led programs, federal programs, state programs, okay? And so it's real for people who are in poverty. But extreme poverty are people who live on $1.25 or less a day. And they can't afford food, they can't afford a home, they can't afford schooling, they can't afford health care, and literally they die. And there's no safety net. And so we just felt, you know, we've got to do something about this here. And so we started this organization, and you guys jumped in really quickly. So we started this thing in 2006, and in 2008, your pastor Pete came with us to Haruma. And I thank Pete that he did that, because that was a bold move. Like, I really like Pete. I really do. I think this is a great church. I think you guys are great people. You're great friends of when I grow up. You're great partners with Faraha in Haruma. But I really like Pete. I like Pete's mind. I've always liked Pete's mind. I got to know Pete a little bit. Although we were back-to-back pastors, I didn't know Pete when I went into the cornfields of Illinois. It was in Hawaii. It was a hard one, that one. We went to Hawaii together. It was a tough one. And that was when we taught a little bit of theology. I like his mind. I like his personality and his character. I deeply admire his giftedness. You have an extremely gifted pastor. I mean, yeah, you know. And I hope that my heart is as open and as brave as Pete's is. And he's just so darn good looking. Darn it, you know. Apart from the hair thing, okay? Apart from the hair, I don't know what's going on with the hair man this morning, but it's wild looking, okay? Of course, those of us who are follically challenged have struggled with people who are here. But just so you know, Pete, okay? It is the female hormone estrogen that causes hair to grow. So you are just a big wussy. So 2008, you guys joined in with us and you started the feeding program. We didn't have a feeding program there, okay? And these kids would come to school and they wouldn't make it through the whole day because they just fall asleep. A lack of vital nutrients, and they just fell asleep. So the feeding program became essential, not just for their health, but also for their education. And you can go there now. When we went there in 2006, their eyes were all kind of yellowy, and there was snot coming out of their noses. And now you don't see that with the kids that we help in Haruma. Their eyes are glistening, their teeth are brilliant, and there's no snot on their noses. Just don't touch the hair. But that's a whole other story, okay? And you guys started that. First for 3 days a week, and then 5 days a week. And now, every day, 910 meals are served in Faraha. 910. It's phenomenal, okay? That's the primary school, which you guys really help in, and also we've got a high school as well, don't forget, okay? And for most of these children, this is the only meal of the day. And then they get to Friday at 4:30, and they leave, and they don't get to eat again until Monday morning. And we've looked to see how we could address that, and it's really not that easy. And it's one of the things they're still brainstorming, but we're just grateful that the nutrition that they get Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday helps them get through until Monday after the weekend. Every day, 910. Every day, 500 children in the primary school, and they're taught well. It's the #1 performing school in the district. And guess how many schools are in the district? 120. They beat government schools hands down, okay? First school in the district. And then we've got the high school of 120 students. Every day in that slum of Haruma, 750,000 people in a 2-mile square block. Every day, 5,000 people gain support and help and empowerment and a means of living from Faraha. And it's your giving that makes that happen. Like, don't miss it, folks, okay? You are a part of empowering children out of extreme poverty. And some of you have met them, a few of you, and I hope more of you will come. We've got some people coming. I've got a trip going in February and in June and in September, so let me know, okay? But some of you have never met them, and some of you maybe never will meet them, but you are a part of changing their lives. Every day, social workers walk the sewage-soiled streets, and they visit on sick children or children with difficult home lives and bring counsel and help. Every day, 45 staff. And when we went in 2008, there was no staff. There was about 7 part-timers who were, sorry, they weren't even part-time, they were volunteers. And now there's 45 full-time paid staff. And they arrive at work at 6:30 in the morning, and they give their best for the forgotten children of Haruma. Every day. Every day hope is given, and you guys are the deliverers of hope. When that wire or that transfer comes from you guys to us every month, we send that there straight on to Haruma. And that there is vital money for them to do what they do. They're gifted people, they're educated, the leaders, they're committed, but they just don't have resources. They live in a slum. They haven't got any money. They've never had any money. But every month that wire arrives, and they can buy the food, and they can pay the teachers' salaries, and they can pay the rent for the building. They can pay for the clean water that they get to drink. Every day you bring hope. So don't stop. Don't stop, because that would be cruel, wouldn't it? It would be cruel now just to pull the rug from under their feet and say, we're going to move on to something more trendy to help. No, every day they rely on you. When they get to the end of the month, they get no money in the bank account, and they rely on that wire transfer coming through. Every day, there's more that Faraha could do. High school students have now finished. Form 4 is the final class of high school. They sat their exams in November. Those 25 students are now back in Haruma. And we don't want them to get sucked into a bad life, so we've got to get some of them to university, some of them to college, and some of them into a vocation center, and that costs money. Their teachers and their staff, they're so committed. But you know, if you're a primary school teacher in Faraha, you earn $125 a month. That just gets you out of poverty. Just and no more. And then the government moves, and they add 14% to 18% value-added tax onto essentials. Things like maize, corn, bread, flour. And we need to increase their salaries a little bit to get them up into a more sustainable level of income. And so we need further help. Faraha needs a further $3,000 a month. Actually, $3,300. That's $110 a day. So how many people are here? 120? 150? That's each of you given like $30 a month. And they'll get the rest done. It's as simple as that. I mean, Pete was a bold man. Fancy asking me to come on Thanksgiving week. Well, that's all I do is ask for money. So we can do it the hard way or the short way, the quick way or the easy way, okay? You can give it to me now, and I don't need to preach. You can all go home and have fun, okay? Or I can drag it out, okay, and get you at the end, okay? But no, I mean, this is how it works. $3,000, that's how much more we need a month to help them do what they're doing even better. And that's 33 people giving $100, or 100 people giving $33. Or just one kind person writing me a check. You know? Well, hey, I got some leaflets if you want to read more. And you guys know, as we've been here around a little bit, go to our website and sign up for the e-news. But hey, maybe you've got friends and they go to other churches. Let's get them involved. Or maybe you're a businessman. We've got a business program that will get you to attract your customers in a different way. Or just there's existing donors doing a little bit more, or a generous benefactor. Every day someone is being saved from hell, literally. But every day, some stay in the hell of Haruma and are stuck in extreme poverty. So, everyone doing a little bit more every day makes it go a long way. And that's what we want to see happen. So think about that there as I get ready to preach, okay? Because I'm here to preach, okay? I'm not just here to ask for money, okay? But I am asking for money, okay? And just so you know, Scottish roads are never straight. So like Scottish preaching isn't straight either, okay? We're going to get somewhere, I hope. It's going to be twisty and we're going to take a few turns. You're going to wonder, what the heck's that guy smoking? But hopefully we'll get to the destination at the right place at the right time. And what is the time? Take your time. Oh, cha-cha. Two unemployed guys are talking. And one says, no, I'm going to become a lion tamer. And the other replies, that's crazy. You don't know nothing about no lion taming. Yeah, I do. Well, okay, answer me this. When one of those lions comes at you all roaring and biting, what you going to do? Well, then, I'm going to grab that big chair that they all carry, and I'm going to stick it in his face until he backs down. Well, what if that lion takes that big paw, and with his big paw just swipes the chair away? What are you going to do then? Well, then I'll take the whip that they all carry, and I'll whip him, and I'll whip him until he backs down. Well, what if that lion bites that whip with his big teeth and bites it in two? What are you going to do then? Well, then I'll take the gun that they all carry, and I'll shoot the lion. Well, what if that gun don't work? What will you do then? Well, then I'll pick up some of the poop that's on the bottom of the cage, and I'll throw it in his eyes and run out the cage. Well, what if there ain't no poop in the bottom of the cage? What you going to do then? Well, that's dumb. Because if that lion comes at me and he throws the chair out of the cage and he bites the whip in two and my gun don't work, there's going to be some poop on the bottom of the cage. You can bet on that. Which leads me to ask my all-important question this morning. Would you poop in a crisis? Like, they say that you're never really a marathon runner until you've pooped while running. All I can say is, I'm a real marathon runner. TMI, I'm sorry, okay? But most of us know that when nervous or when in a crisis, it's not just folklore, but occasionally some people poop in a crisis. Dr. Oz confirms that, and he knows stuff, you know. You can believe Dr. Oz. Would you poop in a crisis? I believe in my own humanity. The film Divergent. I haven't watched all those kind of films, but I actually watched Divergent, and there's a line in Divergent that resonated with me. In the film it says, humanity can excuse any behavior. I'm here this morning to take back our humanness as something good. I'm not here to ask you to behave like God. I'm here to ask you to live fully human. Maybe salvation is about becoming fully human. Søren Kierkegaard, the great Danish Christian existentialist, said it this way: now, with God's help, I shall become myself. Are you yourself? And as a guy who loves to talk theology, I'd love to stay talking on this one, but that's for another day. Okay, that road just stopped, okay? Let me read to you a fabulous incident in the life of Jesus, the most human man who ever lived. It's in the book of Mark's Gospel, which is the second book in the New Testament. If you haven't got a Bible, or if you just have it but don't want to keep it open, let me read to you the story. And then we'll talk a little bit about it, and we'll try to find out where this thing's all going, okay? We're in Mark's Gospel, chapter 6, and I'm going to read verses 30 to verses 44. Then the apostles gathered around Jesus and told him everything they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come with me privately to an isolated place and rest a while, for many were coming and going and there was no time to eat." So they went away by themselves in a boat to some remote place. But many people saw them leaving and recognized them, and they hurried on foot from all the towns and arrived there ahead of them. As Jesus came ashore, he saw the large crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, so he taught them many things. When it was already late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is an isolated place, and it's already very late. Send them away so that they can go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy something for themselves to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said, "Should we go and buy bread for 200 silver coins and give it to them to eat?" He said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he directed them all to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they reclined in groups of hundreds and fifties. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. He gave them to his disciples to serve the people, and he divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And they picked up the leftover pieces, and the bread and the fish that were left over totaled 12 baskets full. Now there were about 5,000 people who ate the bread. This is the famous story called the feeding of the 5,000. And what you maybe don't know is that if you were to flip back earlier in Mark's Gospel chapter 6, immediately before this story happened, Jesus had just received some bad news, some crisis-causing news. John the Baptist, no stranger to Jesus, in fact, his cousin, had just been brutally murdered. The story of the feeding of the 5,000 takes place right smack bang in the middle of a terrible family tragedy. These two families, the family of Jesus and the family of John the Baptist, were very, very close. Remember the Christmas story, which is coming up the next several weeks, when Mary finds out that she was pregnant. She wasn't married yet. She finds out that she's pregnant. She's going to have this baby, and she sort of heads off on a little journey, and she wants to talk to a close confidant and seek out a relative for some counsel. And remember who it was that she went to? It was John the Baptist's mother, a lady called Elizabeth. So these two families had been through a lot together. They had some history. They were close. And I want you to understand that this is not some distant disaster that just takes place. Jesus has just received the news that his close friend, a boy who he grew up with, a man who he highly regarded, his cousin, has just been murdered. It's with no surprise that we read that when Jesus heard what had happened to John and how stressed and busy his disciples were, that he needed to withdraw to a remote area to get some privacy so that he could process and deal with the news. They could rest a little. And if you read Mark's Gospel chapter 6, the writer Mark wants us to get the idea that Jesus needs some space. He stresses the words, come by yourselves, a quiet place, get some rest. He calls it a solitary place. And there's not a person in this room who doesn't understand that. Sometimes life just gets too hard to be around people. Sometimes life just gets too hard to carry on as usual. And you need to be alone. You need to withdraw. You need to find that quiet space. Well, the story tells us that Jesus is heading to this quiet place, and the crowds follow him. And they get there, and they get there ahead of Jesus, and when Jesus pulls up to the quiet place, there's this huge crowd standing there. There's no food, and there's no place to buy food, and everybody's getting worked up about this, and the crowd are hungry, and the disciples were getting worried, and everybody was in an uproar except Jesus. This is Jesus in a crisis. He needed space, he needed time, he needed to be alone, he needed to pray, he maybe just wanted a few close friends around him. And the crowd didn't care. Jesus had become something of a celebrity. He'd done a few miracles, he'd done some healings, and the crowds were after him relentlessly. Not as supporters, not as devoted disciples. We read in the New Testament that they followed him because they always seemed to want something from him. More miracles, more healings, more signs. The crowd has bottomless needs. And then it happens. And if this wasn't in the Bible, I wouldn't believe it, okay? He gets to this solitary place. He sees these crowds that are waiting for him. And verse 34 of Mark's Gospel, chapter 6, says that when Jesus landed and saw the large crowd, he had compassion on them. Compassion. He didn't snap. He didn't break. He didn't say, "Get out of here." He had compassion. And I don't want you to miss this. He had compassion not because these were his devoted followers who were waiting for him. They weren't. He had compassion not because they had come appropriately or apologetically. They hadn't. He had compassion not because they deserved it. They didn't. He had compassion just because he saw that they were in need. They were hungry. And out of this story comes a deep truth of the Holy Scriptures. You don't need to deserve Jesus. You just need to need him. You just need to need him. And that's a preach all on its own. But maybe some of you needed to hear that. Stop waiting, trying to impress God of how important you might be to him and his cause. Just reach out to him because you need him. That's all. But for today, notice, Jesus isn't pooping. For Jesus, there's never a crisis he can't handle. There's never a situation he can't reach into. There's never a circumstance that he's not able to deal with. There's never a needy person he doesn't feel compassion for. Jesus had compassion. Now, if I have sympathy, that would mean I feel bad for you. If I have empathy, that means I feel bad with you. But it says Jesus had compassion. Compassion. Now, time out. There's a word that we need to do a little bit of teaching on, okay? It's the word splagnesthei. Splagnesthei. And it's only ever used of Jesus in the New Testament. It's a word that means it comes from the insides. Literally, the bowels. You feel something so deep, so true. It's right there in the midst of your gut. And it's out of your guts that it comes. Compassion always marries feelings with action. When Jesus sees the people, he feels something deep in his bowels. And then he has to do something right out of the depths of his bowels. Jesus had a bowel movement. But it's not poop. It's an outpouring of love, of care, of provision, of helping the people, of responding to their needs, of feeding them. He was moved, and he had to do something. There was a response that was required for the feeling that he was feeling in his gut. Let's take 3 minutes here, and let's watch a short video of some of the faces of kids that you help in Faraha, along with a few of the kids that we help in Guatemala and Haiti. So the question is, do you feel something? Will you do something? Are you moving in your bowels? Leads me to my second question this morning. What has God tossed on your schedules? Here's Jesus. He's tired, he's weary, he's emotional, he's drained, he's exhausted. And just as he rightly, deservedly finds a quiet spot for some quick R&R, God throws 5,000 needy people at him. Now notice the reaction of the disciples. 5,000 people are way too many people. Send them away. Tell them, said the disciples, to go and buy themselves something to eat. 5,000 people were not on their schedules. They were looking forward to a quiet evening, maybe light up the barbecue, watch an episode of Kosher Come Dancing. Not 5,000 people. What has God tossed on your schedule and you want to toss it back? Maybe this morning, God is tossing on your schedule thousands of children living with no food, no schooling, no way out, like my cheeky friend on the screen. Maybe God is tossing on your schedule today children who live in extreme poverty, alone, orphaned, and HIV infected. Only because of where they were born. They didn't make that choice. They're innocent, but condemned by the injustices of our world. And a startling reality rears its head. You can be very close to Jesus in proximity, but yet be far from Jesus in perspective. The disciples literally were standing next to Jesus, but they were far away from Jesus in how he saw life. You can be in his presence, but out of his will. God has the reputation of tossing people and things on our schedules at the completely inappropriate times. Inappropriate times and inappropriate things. Bring your imagination for a few more minutes, okay? Richard Stearns, who wrote a book called The Hole in the Gospel, helped me with this illustration, okay? Today, this morning, you opened up your Sunday newspaper, and the headline went something like this: 100 aeroplanes crash, killing 20,000 people. Think of the pandemonium this would create across the world. Heads of states, parliaments, and congresses are convened to grapple with the nature and the causes of this tragedy. 100 aeroplanes crash, 20,000 people dead. Think of the avalanche of news coverage and how shocked everybody would be. Staggering news. Newscasters would weep as they read it. People would hear it disbelievingly. For some, they would faint with the emotion. It's the biggest human disaster beyond the Great War. Now imagine that you open your newspaper on Monday morning and another 100 aeroplanes have crashed, and 100 more the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. It's unimaginable that something that terrible could ever happen. Our minds cannot fathom 20,000 people dying every day because of air disasters. But guess what happened yesterday? And guess what's happening today? And guess what's going to happen tomorrow? 20,000 children will die of preventable causes related to poverty. And there will be no media coverage. There's no heads of state or congresses stopping what they're doing to address the crisis. There's no investigations launched. There's no public outcry. There's no CNN specials for a week long. And it will happen tomorrow, and it will happen the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that. Almost 10 million children will be dead in the course of the next 12 months with preventable disease caused by hunger. One child dies every 3.5 seconds. Every time the hand drops, it is a terrible rhythm, but it's real. And the world doesn't know, because the world doesn't care. And we do nothing. And then we go to bed at night, and we say a prayer, and we say, God, thank you for today, for tomorrow. I ask, Lord, that you'll just show me your will. What's your will, God, for my life? Jesus, I just want to do what you want me to do. Show me your will. Anyone's bell ringing? There's a guy in a diet, and he wants a donut so badly, and he could taste it. But he knows he shouldn't have one. It's not in the diet plan. But he drives past a donut shop, and he prays, God, I'm here before the donut shop, and I'm going to circle the block. And if there's a parking space outside the donut shop, then I will know that it's your will that I should have a donut. So he circles the block. And sure enough, on the 6th time around, there's a space. I was a pastor, 20-odd years. There was 2 or 3 questions that always came up in the counseling sessions. And one of those questions was always, how do I know God's will for my life? Just give to the flippin' poor. Just give. Now stay with me for the last few moments, okay? And we'll return back to the miracle that Jesus did. The one that we believe in, the one that we follow, is the one who gave a banquet for 5,000 people in the middle of a wilderness. He's the one who took nothing and he made something. He's the one who is himself the bread of life. So here is the Christ, the Messiah, and he's feeding 5,000 people a banquet in the wilderness. Now, every Jew knew that the great prophets of Israel had spoken of a coming day, a day when the Messiah would hold a banquet. The great messianic, eschatological banquet. And if you were to read the Old Testament, the great prophets, Isaiah, Ezekiel, they spoke powerfully of this coming banquet, and they used incredible imagery about bounty and abundance, and the vineyards would be full of wine, and crops would never fail, and the enemies would be destroyed, and peace and prosperity and long life, a banquet that never ends. And this was going to happen one day when the kingdom of this world becomes the kingdom of God, the new age. And every Jewish person believed that this was the promise of the prophets, and this is what God was going to deliver, and it was meant to be there in the promised land, but they lost the promised land. But he's going to bring something even greater promise when the Messiah comes. And there's going to come a day when there will be no more hunger, and no child will be an orphan, and there'll be no more AIDS, and no more extreme poverty, and no more injustice, and no more children dying every 3.5 seconds, because the kingdom of this world will become the kingdom of God. And it would happen when the Messiah comes, and the banquet would be given. And Jesus took a few loaves and a couple of fish, and he did his thing. And 5,000 people in a wilderness were fed, and they left not because there was no more food, they left because they were full. And when they walked away, the disciples took out the baskets and picked up the remains. And there was 12 baskets left. 12. Why was there 12? Oh, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 disciples. And the 12 disciples each took a basket of the oversupplied bread. Now go and share it. Now go and give it away. Now go and offer the bread of life to others. The disciples walked away with a basket load of bread. Now keep sharing it. For every follower of Jesus Christ there, his disciples, he said to them, you're now givers of the kingdom to others, bringers of the new age into the present. Take the basket of the eschatological bread, take it and give it away. I wonder if the disciples ate the bread themselves, or did they pass it on? Did they share it? There's only one way their baskets would never empty, and it wouldn't be if they kept it to themselves. Now you have a basket. You have something that God has blessed you with. You have been given a foretaste of the new life. God has blessed you. Are you hoarding it? It's going to fade or rust or rot. Or are you sharing the banquet? Are you hoarding it? Or are you giving it away? There's a crisis going on today, and you and I have the means to change it. Some of us believe that we can kick extreme poverty off the face of the planet, and it's our generation that's going to do it if we all just give a little bit more than we're presently giving. Don't poop in a crisis. Give. Let's stand for closing prayer. And we walked in here, God, the week of Thanksgiving, and enough was on our plate. Family and friends and food and cooking and preparing and getting a 5-day work done in 3 days. And then, Lord, darn it, the shopping on Friday. It's a busy week. My schedule's full. And we walked in here, and unsuspectingly, you've dropped something onto our plate. Under our watch, 22 children have died since I started this prayer. And we're a part of the solution. Because you have blessed us, God. You've given us a basket bigger than we ever imagined. May we give it away. May we share. And in so doing, may your kingdom come. May your will be done on earth as you always hoped it would. may we represent you the way you would want us to represent you. This is our prayer. Amen.